Good morning all. I am going to talk about the nutrient cycle and human impact on nutrient cycle, how the human impact alters the cycle in the natural environment. So next, what are all the ways in which our lifestyle directly or indirectly affects the hydrologic cycle? What does it mean? It is a water cycle environment, how the water has been cycled, how the human interventions or human activities it alters the particular cycle. We know this. There are three different scenarios here: the evaporation, transpiration, and precipitation. These three different steps plays a major role in means of the hydrologic cycle, water cycle. Evaporation, especially 84% of water what we get from the precipitation, from the rainfall, it's been evaporated from oceanic surface. 80% of the water has been evaporated from the oceanic surface. Only the 16% it's from the land. That too, it's just through the plants. Nearly 90% of the water has been contributed to the clouds by only the means of transpiration. The plants, the vegetation are very much essential on the land surface in the terrestrial ecosystem as well as the oceanic surface ecosystem. It is very much important for these plants to transpirate the 90% of water. More than that, it's required to the cloud formation. Then this special gravitational force which facilitates has to get the rain, the precipitation. The precipitation, when it was successful, so the earth withdraws all the precipitated water molecules as a means of rain. So what we get is a rainfall. So this is how the hydrological cycle is naturally being performed. When where it goes wrong due to the human activities and anthropogenic activities largely alters the cycle. Probably you can go through, probably you can follow the red arrows where the human interventions spoil or alters the hydrological cycle. So naturally what happens if you destroyed, if you perform the deforestation activity to fix or to store or to infiltrate the water into the groundwater table. That's why it is called aquifer. The aquifer is a water what if this is not, if the vegetation is not there, if the forest systems are not there, the rainfall, it will cause the soil erosion, it will simply run off into the ocean. So water, it won't be infiltrated into the soil, and it will not reach the ground table water source. It will simply run off into the ocean. So eventually what happens, we supposed to have the certain percentage of water in our ground table, so the vegetation will uptake those water and transpirate those water. They'll use it for their particular activities like means of photosynthesis, as well as for the respiration, as well as for their survival, and as well as for their production of their biomass. Eventually that water can be transmitted back to this atmosphere. But if the infiltration is not there, eventually it's going to alter that particular cycle. The same way, increased flooding from the wetland. I would like to show three different scenarios here. One is the lack of infiltration, which causes the landslides, soil erosion, and so on. And also if you alters the water bodies and wetlands, the water bodies and wetlands like lakes, ponds, dam sites, or natural dam sites, or the very important water bodies where they act like a sponge. Whatever the rain we get, that rain should be stored on our terrestrial surface. If it's been flooded, if it is the exceeded rainfall, if you are not actually storing those water, it will simply run off into the ocean. So there is no the activity of sponge. So we can't keep those water can be utilizable for our terrestrial ecosystem. So this is the second effect. Likewise, if you see the continuous deforestation in Amazonian basin, Amazonian forest, as well as the forest fire and also the human activities, definitely in future, by it has been predicted like in 2050, the Amazonian forest nearly to 20 to 30% will turn into grassland. So definitely it will be decreased if this particular activity it's still on, if it is still on. There are three different points one could say here that how the water cycle has been altered. The infiltration, and so if it is infiltration is changed by human activities, the aquifer or groundwater table is drastically been changed, as well as it will. And also um, what are the ways in which we directly or indirectly affect the carbon cycle? We know the carbon cycle very well. The carbon fixation, it's been the natural process where the plant produces do the photosynthesis. But due to the human activities such as the burning of fossil fuels, forest fires, as well as the deforestation, then predominantly the transportation, all these are interlinked. The burning of the forest fuels, which is a non-renewable energy source, the forest fires, as well as the deforestation and transportation. Due to these activities, what happens? We emit the enormous amount of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, which causes the greenhouse gases effect in a higher level that eventually result into global warming. So the naturally the carbon dioxide still it's been emitted to the atmosphere, but the level of the carbon what the natural ecosystem emits, that has been also been fixed in an ecosystem. But the over exploitation, as well as the uncontrolled human activities, that resulted into the level increase of carbon dioxide in atmosphere. What are the ways in which we directly or indirectly affect the nitrogen cycle? Nitrogen cycle, where the amount of nitrogen which is present in the atmosphere is much more higher than any other gas. We know that very well. But nitrogen cycle, it's very difficult to fix in your soil, which is very much essential for any plant to grow. But still, there are some of the microbes that do the function for us, like nitrogen fixing rhizobium or any other microbes which fixes the atmospheric nitrogen into soil. But though these are natural phenomena exist in an ecosystem, but what are other activities or alters the cycle, especially the burning the fossil fuels, as well as the production of the inorganic fertilizers that result into deposition of the nitrogen and nitrogen based chemicals into the soil. That nitrogen only can be fixed as an ammonia in soil. It will eventually it will be converted, you could say, is a decomposition of the decomposition activity also facilitate to fix the ammonia. Eventually it will be formed in the form of nitrate. It will be uptaken by the plants. That's how the natural phenomena. But the over accumulation of this nitrogen and nitrogen based chemicals, which lead to the over accumulation of the nitrogen, that causes this soil fertility. Not only the soil fertility, and also the alters the cycle and exceeds the levels of the nitrogen. What is the prediction on nitrogen increase in the environment from human activities? One of the major causes is the fertilizers for the agricultural purpose. What the fertilizers been used for the agricultural purposes are drastically increasing day by day. Grams per year, which means it's a trillion grams per year. The demand as well as the usage of the nitrogen fertilizers, it increases. When you look at this graph, I would like to show what the difference between the natural cycle of nitrogen fixation as well as the difference between the human anthropogenic activity. When you look at this green graph, which indicates the nitrogen fixation in agro ecosystems, but we employ the fertilizers for the crop improvement. What happens? Fertilizers and industrial use has been increased. It has been predicted that it's the projected human input, which is much more higher in the year 2050. It's been predicted to across the nations. When you compare China, it has got 18.7. India is 11.9. Though the Brazil is #1 country in agriculture, it has a very less nitrogen usage. But China and India, both Asian countries, have depended on nitrogen fertilizers in a higher level than any other country. What does the humankind supported with nitrogen-based agriculture? When you look at this particular graph, it's with respect to the nitrogen. Last slides, we are actually focused on the China and India, where the two highly populated countries are in fact dependent on nitrogen-based crop products. In that case, definitely when you put in a global scenario, the population supported without synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, which is lesser than the population fed by synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, because the China and India, both countries, if you put together, the population is highly dependent on the crops. So this should be focused. This has got a very huge impact on the environmental. How does the atmospheric ammonia is fixed artificially? That's actually the particular activity in science drastically increase the high human impact on, especially on nitrogen cycle. The Haber process, also called the Haber-Bosch process, is an artificial nitrogen fixation process and is the main industrial procedure for the production of ammonia today. There is no such scenarios exist to take the nitrogen as such, because we have a very good percentage of nitrogen in the atmosphere. The plant can't take the nitrogen directly. So in that case, there are the microbes that do the function of fixing the atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia, later converted into nitrates, so the nitrates can be uptaken by the plants. But due to this artificial scientific experiment is done by Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch, a Germanian chemist, who had invented the methodology to fix the atmospheric ammonia artificially. How? The hydrogen reacted with hydrogen resulted into ammonia. That ammonia can later be utilized as a nitrate based fertilizers. This is how the atmospheric nitrogen, by adding the hydrogen, it has been artificially produced, and eventually that opened up the new arena in the production of the fertilizers. What are the process altered the phosphate cycle in nature? Phosphate cycle in nature. So in this case, the phosphates, how this has been increased again due to the improper sanitary activities, as well as the usage of phosphate based fertilizers, and also the mining that directly provides the phosphates into the natural system. So eventually what happens, it increases the phosphate levels in an ecosystem that alters the natural phosphate cycle on this environment that eventually results into soil erosion. Soil erosion directly contributes the phosphate that be dissolved in water. So in any natural water body, if that particular region has been exposed for soil erosion, definitely will have the phosphate concentration in high level. So, and also the direct runoff of the any sewage or sanitization activity by humans, that will directly mixed into the oceanic water, as well as any freshwater water bodies, eventually increases the levels of phosphate in a high level. How the sulfur dioxide level have been increased after industrial revolution? It is very important. Sulfur dioxide naturally been emitted by the action of especially in the oceanic sediment, where all the decomposed material. So the process of decomposition of any vegetation or any animal, that directly been stored in either in soil or oceanic sediments. But it has been there is a natural process of converting the sulfur into different forms, and also they'll give rise to sulfur dioxide when it is been ascended to the atmosphere, the form of sulfur dioxide. And also the volcanic activity also emits the sulfur dioxide naturally. But apart from the natural phenomena of this sulfur dioxide cycle, so we also find the other activity like smelting, refining of the ore or mines, burning the coal, and refining the fossil fuels. All these industrial based activities resulted in the higher amount of sulfur dioxide in atmosphere. The sulfur dioxide is one of the very hazardous gas, causes the respiratory diseases throughout the world. So the increased level of sulfur dioxide definitely it is high a threat to the humankind. So due to the human and anthropogenic activity, if it increases in the same manner, that resulted into different environmental causes like acid rain, the sulfuric acid rain. All that is resulted because of the increase of the sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. So there is a recent research that indicate that how the sulfur dioxide level is increased from 1745 to 2000, post-industrial revolution. How the level has been increased. The graph shows that exactly in the last the few decades, like about 3 to 4 decades, the level of the sulfur dioxide is drastically increased due to the industrial activity. In this case, the ash effects on this environment, the bleaching of coral reefs, and also changing the vegetation, destroying the many other activities also has been involved. What is high impact of fertilizer in the natural environment? We know that the NPK, the usage of these fertilizers, artificial fertilizers, non-organic fertilizers, that eventually causes very great impact on the soil fertility, as well as it causes the human health hazards. The United Nations FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, given this graph, the increased usage of these fertilizers drastically been increased, and also in the exponential phase. Even in future, it is how you could say the 200 million tons has been used, and the usage also has been drastically increased in every decade. Which region of the ecosystem holds highest percentage of mineral and nutrients? This is one of the very good question. We know we have come across several ecosystem to see that the nutrient contribution at the end of any life cycle of an organism, that in fact have the high impact on the minerals and nutrients. Especially in the oceanic surface, the upwelling zone. What is it? What does it mean? Upwelling means the oceanic bed or oceanic sediments, due to the wind velocity, and also the movement of cold water to the warm water. We know the El Nino, La Nina effect in our oceanic surface. So the movement of the high pressure zone to the low pressure zone, where the movement of the water currents, which takes up the nutrients which is on the get neutralized with the temperature. So in that particular zone, due to this moment, the nutrients content will be increased in some of the areas where it is upfilled. So in that facilitates the growth of some of the algal, some of the phytoplanktons. That's why it is there. We will frequently see the algal blooms and the phytoplankton richness in the oceanic surface due to the upwelling movement of the water current.